Buenos días. Hola a todos. Lo siento, pero no hablo mucho español. Necesito hablo en inglés. And slowly. Let's round of applause for the interpreters doing a fantastic job up here. Not only do I speak fast, but I speak Australian. It's like Chileno Spanish. It's very difficult. So I want to talk about emergency medicine in the world, and you've just heard from the fathers of emergency medicine in this country and the amazing things that you've been doing here. And I want to tell you a story, show you some pictures. There's not lots of information here. It's more philosophy. It's more philosophic. So just sit back and we'll go for a little ride here. So MRAP is a program I started nearly 20 years ago. And it started as a very small program, just 60 minutes of audio. We had a few hundred listeners in the United States. And in the last 18 years, we have 30,000 people in 96 countries across the world that listen to the program. It's very difficult in the United States to go to any emergency department and the practitioners there are not MRAP subscribers. It's been an amazing ride, and now we do 15 hours of audio and video and text and live shows and much more that's coming. It's been an incredible ride. It's been an incredible ride for me because I grew up in rural Australia, a sheep herder. I was lucky enough to get into medical school, and I watched emergency medicine from the early days in Australia, which was 10, 15, 20 years behind the United States, developed very rapidly. And I've started to watch it here in Chile since I've been coming the last 6 years. You're doing the same thing, but even faster than Australia did. Margaret Mead is a famous American sociologist who was very important in the women's movement in the 70s and the 60s. And she has this quote, "Never believe that a few caring people can't change the world, for indeed, that's all who ever have." And I really believe this, that you can change the world if you gather just a few people who have a vision together. You can do anything. So some of the people that inspire me are probably some of the people that inspire you. Bill Gates, was the richest man in the world, and now he's taken all that wealth and he is turning it towards improving health throughout the world, particularly when it comes to malaria and education for women. Elon Musk, who sees that we are destroying our planet and that governments are not doing enough. So he is trying with his group to radically change the way we use our resources throughout the world. Greg Boyle, who is a Jesuit priest down the road from LA County. And when he was a young man, when he first entered the priesthood, he would hear gunshots in LA in the 80s, and it was the decade of death, they called it, where there was gang members killing each other every night, hundreds of people. And he would take his bicycle, and he would ride to where the gunshots were to try and talk to the gang members, to try and help them, stop being gang members. And he started a program to help gang members leaving the jails to reintegrate into society. And because of the work he's done, the number of gang killings and the number of gangs in Los Angeles has plummeted in the last 30 years. Just one man with a vision. Malala, of course, incredibly brave girl when she was 14. Nobel Prize winner. Amazing. And of course, Julie, and I'll tell you more about Julie. She's my friend who went to Kenya 14 years ago to do HIV testing and treatment, and then started Kenya's first palliative care hospital. And I want to tell you more about her later. So MRAP Go is our global initiative. Because we have been so successful, we now ask the question, what can we do? I went to the Hollywood Bowl and saw the Black Eyed Peas. Anybody know the Black Eyed Peas? I love the Black Eyed Peas. And will.i.am stood up the front and said, what do you do when you've done everything? When you've sold millions of records? When you've played at the White House? When you've done the Super Bowl? When you have more money than you can possibly spend? The only thing left is charity. And so he's spending the rest of his life doing charity. And we feel like we're the same. We've come so far, we've become so successful. The only thing that matters now is what we can give back to emergency medicine, because it's been so good for us. So starting at ACEP, we'll be releasing our global initiative. So we give lots of money to a lot of programs. I'll tell you about a few of them. But starting at ACEP next month, we'll be asking our 30,000 subscribers to see if they want to join us, to give us money to help us spread what we're doing. And so this is a pre-release, and we'll do the full release later. But let's look at some fun pictures first. Where's this? It's down the road. I can't remember the name of this. It's the first thing I found when I came to Chile the first time we walked around. This is beautiful here. Where is this? Anybody know? This is Melbourne, Australia. This is where I went to high school and medical school. And for the last 9 out of the last 10 years, it has been called the most livable city in the world for over 1 million people. This year we lost. We came second to Vienna. Whatever. Where's this? Nueva York. When you watch sci-fi movies like The Matrix, they hold up New York as like the pinnacle of human civilization. Just before we fell off the curve and go into the apocalypse, it's always like New York is the greatest place. Where's this? This is Dubai, which has gone from a desert to this incredible city in a very short time. Where is this? This is Shanghai, which again in a very short period of time has gone from nothing to one of the most technologically advanced cities in the world. And where's this? This could be many places. This could be Los Angeles, this could be Santiago, this is Nairobi in Kenya. So I was in Kenya last year visiting Julie and some friends and doing some work in the hospital. And I was with an Uber driver, an African Uber driver, very dark-skinned, and we're driving through the traffic. It's crazy. And I said to him, what if we crash and we're injured? What happens? Where do we go? And this very dark-skinned African turned as pale as me. He's like, you don't want to crash in Nairobi. Because if you crash, there is no emergency medicine. There is no pre-hospital care. Somebody has to pick you up, put you in the back of a truck, and drive you to the hospital. And when you get to the hospital, there's no emergency physicians. There's just who's ever on for the day. And you are very likely to die, even from relatively minor injuries. That here in Santiago now, in Australia, and in the US, you would survive 100%. But in countries like Kenya, you'll die, because they have no emergency medicine. So before we talk about developing emergency medicine, we should talk about some terms, because there's lots of discussion right now. What's the right term? It's important to use language without upsetting people. And in America, they call it being politically correct, but it's more than being politically correct. It's just trying to be, exchange information without upsetting a culture. So none of these terms are acceptable, but nobody can agree which one we should use. So you shouldn't talk about the third world, because that's like the first world is better, it won the race. We know that there are many countries that are considered third world that are much better than the first world in much of things. The developing world is not a term that people like either, for similar reasons. The global south, people have used this term, but that doesn't, Chile is very different from Australia and different from other countries in Central and South America. So using global south, that's a bad term. The term that most people are using right now is by your gross domestic product divided by the number of people. So you're a low-income country, you're a middle-income country, or you're a high-income country. In my lifetime, Australia has gone from a low-middle-income country to a high-income country. Chile is now a high-middle-income country, and that's happened very quickly in the last 30 years, from a low-income country. Kenya, low-income country. But none of these are very good, and I'll tell you why in a minute. Some people in South America actually coined the term the fat world and the thin world. If you're in a country without much money, everybody tends to be pretty lean and healthy. And then as you get more rich, you get fat, and you get diabetes and hypertension. And so if Chile is starting to get fat, you know that you've got a lot of money. But that's not a good thing. Paul Farmer is the head of Partners in Health, who's been working in Haiti for 30 plus years, one of the lowest income countries in the world, and he talks about the fourth world. And this is a term that we're going to hear more and more. And what does that mean? This is an apartment complex in Detroit, in the richest country in the world. I love this picture. So if we look up at the top on the left, that's Hiroshima, just after the atomic bomb was dropped in 1945. Japan at the time was devastated by the war, by the nuclear weapons, and you see Hiroshima has been completely destroyed. On the top right is Detroit at the same time, same day. Detroit is one of the richest, biggest cities in the United States. Incredibly wealthy. Cars, they're building munitions. It's an incredibly wealthy city. If you fast forward 60 years and you look on the bottom left, you see Hiroshima today. It's a bustling, incredibly rich city with great emergency care and great EMS that's developing. And on the bottom right, you see Detroit today. So you can move from wealth to poverty and from poverty to wealth pretty rapidly in the current age. And Detroit is one of those places which is what Paul Farmer would call the fourth world. It is a resource-restricted, very low-income area within a much richer neighborhood. And we see this all over the world. We see it here in Chile. So you can go to PUC, and you can get as good emergency medicine care as you can anywhere in the world. And you have CT scanners, and you have MRIs, you have board-certified emergency physicians right there. And then you go 30 minutes down the road, and you have a much lower-resourced hospital that does incredibly good work, but with much less resources. And that's exactly the same as it is in the United States. If you go to Cedars-Sinai Hospital or UCLA, they've got 10 CT scanners and 10 MRIs, and you can get incredible care. And then you drive 30 minutes down the road to the county hospital, and you see the same thing. Patients waiting in the waiting room, very low resources. It's the fourth world. There are two different worlds that live in the United States. And I think there's two different worlds in Chile, and there's probably two different worlds in most countries. There's high resource and low resource. And that's why the concept of calling all countries you're a low resource country, you're a high resource country, is too simple. Because within countries, there's different resources as well. So the old model was when you're in a low resource country and you were developing medicine, here's what you would do: public health. The basics of public health is don't poop in the water and then drink it. That's the sort of the fundamentals. We all accept that. That's a good idea. As soon as you do that, your health gets way better, immediately. I remember when I was in Australia in med school, they showed this graph of mortality and how it had plummeted. So it's going along like this. Everybody's dead at 40. Everybody in the world dies at 40. And then it starts to get much better immediately. And they asked us in our first year of medical school, what happened at this inflection point? What changed that? Was it penicillin? And half of us put up our hand. Must be penicillin. They said, is it aspirin? And the other half of the room puts up their hand. And they're like, no, this is when we stop pooping in the water and drinking it. And almost all of what you can do is doing that. But once you get past there, what is reasonable? So primary care is important. It's important to treat your chronic diseases, your hypertension, diabetes, whatever it is. And women's health is obviously very important. Perhaps the second most important thing after clean water is women's health and women's education. Bill Gates has shown throughout the world that the most important thing you do after the very basics is that you let girls go to school, because then they are able to look after their children better, but then they have less children, and those children are healthier. And so women's health becomes the most important thing. But what's next? Because this is really basic. In most countries, you can do this. And what's next? People have focused on this for a very long time. So it might be hard to believe, but just sort of 60 years ago, the US was focused on those three things. And that's all for their healthcare. And yes, they had surgery and they had other things. But there was no emergency care. I was playing golf with an 86-year-old trauma surgeon in Australia about 15 years ago. And I said, what was it like in Los Angeles, in the 50s? If I got hit by a car, if I got shot, what would happen? And the answer was just like Nairobi is today. Somebody would pick you up, a friend, a taxi, a cop, and drive you to a hospital, maybe, or drive you to the police station where you're bleeding to death. And the cops would look at you and they'd say, we should probably take this person to a hospital. That's Los Angeles just 50 years ago. And these pictures here show, first of all, JFK. He was shot in Dallas, and the world was watching. And who did he get looked after? The most powerful man in the world, just 60 years ago, 50 years ago. Who looked after him? He went to Parkland Hospital. Who was the first person he saw? Was it an emergency physician? Did he go see Pablo or Isabel? Somebody trained in emergency medicine? He saw a second-year surgical resident, 2 weeks or 2 months out of internship. That was who the most powerful man in the world saw when he had his injury. It was incredible. And during that time, the Vietnam War in America, in Vietnam, was heating up, and soldiers were returning from Vietnam and coming back saying, I get better care in the jungles of Vietnam for my gunshot wound than on the streets of Boston or in Los Angeles or in Detroit. And so during that time in the late 60s and early 70s, people like these men here started emergency medicine in the United States because it was not acceptable that in war you could have mass units and better care than you could for the general population in your country. So emergency medicine developed a really short time ago. And ASAP was there the whole time, and now this year in Santiago in the United States, they're celebrating their 50th anniversary. And what did they do to make emergency medicine go from nothing to where it is today in the United States? It was through education, it was through conferences, and then it was through training people, and those people trained the next generation, and within a very short time you had a fully fledged specialty of emergency medicine. And now many of those people run hospitals, the editors of the major journals in the United States in a very short time, within 1 or 2 generations. So here's my friend Ella. Ella is Julie's daughter, biological daughter, and this is their hospital in Kenya. And it's a palliative care hospital, and it's in the middle of a little village. And as soon as you call yourself a hospital in somewhere like Kenya, you don't just do palliative care. Every single day, people come out of the village, come out of the forest, and look for what type of care. Do they come asking for treatment for their hypertension? No. Do they come and ask treatment for their diabetes? No. Why do they come to this hospital that's not really a hospital? They come for emergency care, because what brings you out of the village is something happened to you. So what if you're riding your bike in Kenya and you fall off and you dislocate your shoulder? What do? In many cases, what happens is that you never get it relocated. An incredibly simple injury. And then it fibroses down and you get scar tissue and you become non-functional and you can't work. And you starve to death and you die from a dislocated shoulder, and it happens all the time. So if you were to go to Kenya tomorrow, what would you do? You don't need a CT scanner. You don't need an MRI. You don't even need an X-ray. What people in Kenya need, for example, as an example of a low-resource country, is this. Somebody who's trained in the fundamentals of emergency medicine. And you don't need a lot of these people. You just need enough to start the process, to then train other people to do it, to even train people to do it at a much simpler level, because you don't go to the lowest income countries and you give them American medicine with lots of tests and MRIs. You give them the fundamental training of emergency medicine, and you just pop that shoulder back in, and you give them some exercises to do, and you've changed that person's life. It's an incredible thing to think about. So Paul Farmer, again, has been in Haiti, one of the lowest resource countries in the world, for 30 years, and they did a lot of public health, and they did a lot of women's health, but recently they've realized that's not enough, that you have to provide emergency care. It is fundamental. As soon as you clean the water and you do the women's health, you must follow up with comprehensive care, and comprehensive care starts with emergency medicine. It doesn't end with emergency medicine, it starts with it. And they've gone even further, saying, so you get some emergency physicians, and they've just graduated the first 6 emergency physicians in Haiti. And then the next thing you do is you take those emergency physicians and you amplify it throughout the country. So you go into the communities and you say, look, we can't make emergency physicians everywhere right now, but we can bring some people in that are interested, spend 6 months with them, show them the basics, put them back out into the communities, and they can save lives and do the basics. And then when they are overwhelmed or they need more help, then they send them to the big center where there's emergency physicians. So this is the kind of model that's spreading throughout Haiti. It's the kind of model that works in lots of places, but it doesn't start at the community with public health and then move to the hospital. It starts at the hospital where you train emergency physicians and then you send them back out in the community. So it's a different way of thinking that Paul Farmer and his group have taken 40 years to realize is the best way. And I just wanted to show you in their first experience, they opened up a big hospital, they started the training program, the kind of emergencies that they would see in their hospital. And before I looked at this, I was like wondering, I wonder what are the really weird things you're going to see in this low-resource country with the first emergency department and the first residency. And it's just the same as we see in the United States. And I bet you it's exactly the same as the patients you see here in Chile. There's about 20 to 25% of the things is trauma. I broke my arm, I dislocated this, and we know how to do that stuff. And then there's the non-trauma. And the non-trauma is all the stuff that we see in the United States that you see here. It's like UTIs, it's pyelo, it's a little hypertension, a little pneumonia. And you don't need a lot of resources to treat most of that pie. So you can do amazing things with just a few resources. So the thing I've come to realize, and I didn't really recognize this even when I was training, that emergency medicine is fundamental care, even at the base level. It certainly is when you've got a high-resource country, but even in the lowest resource countries, the next thing that has to happen is emergency medicine. And it seems counterintuitive, but it's absolutely true. So we're developing MRAP, Global Outreach, which is we spend a lot of money doing stuff, but we're putting it all together. We've started an official nonprofit in the United States, and then in October we're going to ask our 30,000 subscribers, would you like to help? And some of the programs that we're going to do is really focused on residencies. So how can we help residents get the education they need? We don't want to start residencies. We don't have those kind of resources. We don't want to open hospitals. But once the residencies are started, once each country has got enough people that are interested, just a small group of people trying to change the world, we can come and help. So we can bring those residents to the United States and do some training with them. We can send faculty like Billy Mallon to go down there and inspire. We can do a lot of this stuff. And here's an example. Who is this handsome, devastatingly handsome man? So Pablo had already training in emergency medicine, but he wanted to go further. And so I came to Chile and we did this thing, and I met Pablo, and I'm like, this guy's amazing. What can we do to help? He's like, well, I'd like to come to the States. I need to get some more ultrasound training so I can teach the residents. I need to do some administrative stuff, and I'd like to do some education stuff. So Pablo came and stayed with us for a year, and we had a great time, and we drank lots of wine and watched movies. But we also did a lot of work. And then Pablo came back to Chile, and I could see within a year of coming back all the skills that he had learned and that had spread throughout the residency. And it's really an amazing story, and we gave him a little plaque. It's his favorite plaque, I'm sure. But something as simple as that, you find somebody in a community and you help them and you say, come and let's talk and let's get to know each other. And it's been an amazing ride. So that's part of what we're going to do, is that we're going to bring people like Pablo and others throughout the world, bring them to the United States, train with them, but also send our faculty back and do what's happening in this place here. Just start to get to know each other. Because what happens is magic. It's not the education that's happening up here that's important. It's getting to know each other. And then when people visit the United States, they call Stuart or me or Billy and say, hey, I'm here for a few days. Do you mind if I come and see how your emergency department works? And vice versa. When we come to different countries, we go and see what you guys are doing. And there's this exchange of information. And it's the most important thing that we do. So this year, we're going to bring a bunch, like 20 residents from Haiti, from Ghana, some people from Chile, to come to ACEP. Because there's 9,000 ER docs at ACEP, 9,000. And again, it's not about coming to see the lectures, it's just being part of that community and going, my gosh, there's people from all over the world doing what I do to inspire them. So it's pretty exciting. And then there's Sarah. So Sarah Krager is MRAP faculty, she does some lectures, and she's in Haiti right now. She's a double-boarded in emergency medicine and critical care. And you're going to hear a lot about Sarah because she is a genius. She's also a fantastic doc, and the residents and the faculty love her. She's really an amazing person. So on her own dime, she decided that she needed to go to Haiti to teach critical care concepts because, again, you don't need lots of expensive stuff. You need to understand the basics. And she just paid for herself to go, and I heard this and I'm like, Sarah, let us help you be part of our program. And she said, oh, that'll be great, but I got this other idea. I want to create a residency on a stick, on a USB stick. Because in Haiti and other places where she visits, they have a real problem with their grand rounds and their ongoing training. Like, we need some better lectures and some handouts so that we can have the discussion. We've got the people that are interested, but trying to gather all the information from all of these places is very difficult. So we really want to get a curriculum of emergency medicine, maybe a tiered one for really low resource and moderate resource, and put an entire curriculum onto a USB drive so that they can plug it in, watch some videos, listen to some audio, read some papers, have a discussion. And so it's called Conference in a Box, and she's working with this nonprofit called MedGuru, and now she's going to be working with us. And I think this concept is fantastic. And in fact, let's go back to Paul Farmer's Fourth World. This is a fantastic concept for developing residencies that need help. We can do this. But you know where also needs this? In the United States. There's more than 200 residencies in the United States now. And every time I meet people from Mississippi and other places, they say, the faculty we have weren't trained in emergency medicine. Or they can't possibly do all of the lectures that we need. So can you send us some resources so that we can discuss it? So it's the same thing everywhere. We just need some of these educational materials to get the ball rolling. So we're going to be helping with that. And then another thing that we need to do, particularly throughout the world, is an online resource like UpToDate, but it's for emergency medicine that's better than UpToDate. We're going to be working on that. And then we're also going to be working on the possibility of starting with people here and in other countries, maybe a Spanish language journal, because ACEP was involved with the Annals of Emergency Medicine, and that made a really big difference. And although there is Spanish language journals, can we help move that process along? So these are just some of the things we're doing. And then why do we do it? I had lunch with Isabel yesterday, and we did a little interview, and she was so articulate. She's an incredible person. And she's like, well, what's life about? You can look after yourself, you can look after your family, maybe you can even look after your country, but the most important thing is have this global view of the world. If there isn't charity, if you're not trying to help everybody, particularly those that have less than you, rise up, then what's the point of even being alive? And it was so inspiring, and I absolutely agree with it. That's where we are. So this is our new family. So we have 3 people in our family, my wife and my son and I. And for the last year, we've had 10 people in our family, and the house is very busy. So Julie, you can see here on your left or your right, is married to Titus, and their biological daughter down here is Ella. And what happened is that out of the village coming to the hospital were 8 children with one little tiny baby, a 3-pound baby, saying, our mother died in childbirth last night or 2 nights ago. We don't know how to look after this baby. Could you help? And so Julie took the baby in and started feeding it and helped get the older kids to other places to live and into boarding facilities, and took in the youngest of the other kids, so 4 of the other children, into her house. And then they fed the baby, and the baby got bigger and bigger, and then the baby started crying and crying and crying. And they realized this baby had sickle cell disease. And the story is long and involved, and we'll tell you more about it, but they somehow managed to get UCLA to agree to do bone marrow transplantation for the 2 boys. So for Joffrey and Ryan, and they've been cured of sickle cell disease. They had bone marrow transplantation. And they took this disease, which in Kenya is 100% fatal by the age of 8, and they've given them a new life because she had this global view of the world. Now, we can't do this for everybody yet, but one day we're going to be able to inject people with CRISPR in an HIV virus and cure sickle cell disease, and that's happening, and this research is ongoing at UCLA right now. But this is just an example of, like, we're a global community. These are the best people I know. These are incredible people. These are our brothers and sisters, just as you are to us in the United States and in Australia. And all we care about now in MRAP is doing as much as we can. We've been successful. We want to help. We are inspired by what's happened here. It has been amazing to see how quickly emergency medicine has gone from 0 to, in many ways, ahead of the United States. It's really incredible, and I really believe that. The residents that are in Chile are at least as good and often significantly better than the residents at the same level of training. And how did you do that so fast? Can we do that again? Which is the next country we can take instead of 50 years for America, 30 years for Australia, 20 years for Chile? Can we do it in 10? Wouldn't that be amazing? So that's what we're trying to achieve with MRAP Go. It's a little bit about our philosophy, but the most important thing is, as our friend Joffrey here on his t-shirt said, a little kindness goes a long way. Thanks for listening to this sort of philosophy and this rambling, but I hope you understand that what you are doing is fundamentally changing your countries, and we're going to try and help you do that a little faster. Thank you very much.